What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys another Stargirl review. This time, of course, I'm going to be talking about episode number 4 of season 2. This actually might be my new favorite episode, and I don't mean of the season this time. I know, like, the last couple of episode reviews I've been doing, I just have been saying that this is my new favorite episode of the season. Well, guys, this time I'm saying that this is my new favorite episode of Stargirl, period. So not just of season 2 so far, I mean, like, this actually might be the best episode, including seasons 1 and 2. But before I get into all that, one thing I do want to point out about this review is that I will be kind of comparing it to other CW shows for one last time, talking about why I think like this should be the new direction of for like the other CW shows such as The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and I mean, I know it's a little bit too late for Supergirl because, you know, that show ended, but regardless, you know, I feel like the way that the show has been, not just the way it's filmed, but the way it's written, you know, really does feel like it should just kind of be a new standard in a lot of ways for comic book shows going forward, because it's not that it's up there with like the Disney Plus shows. Obviously, it's not going to ever be up there with the Disney Plus shows because those are literally just movies divided into episodes. But this is, to me, what I feel should be the next step for superhero shows just in general when it comes to that kind of in between going to the like Disney Plus movie-sized miniseries. I don't know if that's how I want to word it, but you know what I mean. Like, essentially, I feel like this needs to be like the new in between. Like what Stargirl does, what Superman and Lois does, that should be like kind of the standard when it comes to not just the filming when it comes to other superhero shows, but just when it comes to writing in general as a whole. So when I'm making some of these comparisons, please note I'm not just saying that the writing is bad when it comes to some of the other superhero shows, because you know me, I'm a huge fan of all the CW superhero shows, but it's me kind of going over like this is a success, right? Stargirl has been a huge success for the CW, so it's kind of weird that they wouldn't want The Flash or Legends of Tomorrow to have what Stargirl has, which is that like bigger budget, less episodes, and just kind of giving them more time to film each individual episode to make it more solidly made in the end. Sorry if I'm not making much sense here, but yeah, I'll get a little more into that when I talk about this episode, but I do promise that this will be the last time I compare it to the other CW shows, and after this, when I go into episode 5 and then onward, it'll just be me talking about it as a standalone show. So I want that to be known. This will be the last time I do this, but there is a good reason why I'm doing it for this episode in particular. So, starting with our opening scene, we have a moment where Artemis is visiting both of her parents in prison, and I like the way the scene kind of transitions between both prisons. Essentially, whenever it's like kind of a close-up of her face, and then it transitions back into seeing who she's talking to, it's always a different parent, but they also imply that she's saying the exact same thing to both of them, up until the very end where she tells her dad that mom says that she loves you, and of course, you can't really relay that message back until the next week and the next time you visit her. So it's one of those things where it really sucks that, you know, the only time she's able to see her parents is only for 15 minutes a day behind a glass window, and having only 15 minutes to really say everything that you want to say to them can never be easy, because I feel like there's so much you would want to tell them, and unfortunately all she can really do is tell her all the negative things going on with her life, which, because there probably aren't that many positive things going on. She's in a foster home, and you know, when you're kind of used to being raised a certain way and then you have to completely change up your lifestyle, it's not easy. So for her, she's so used to having a very kind of strict diet, and you know, the things that she would always bond with her parents over when it comes to like the sports channels, like I believe they specifically talk about Sunday Night Football, how she doesn't get to have any of that at the orphanage anymore. You know, the foods that they eat are all processed foods, which, you know, me personally, I love processed foods, but I'm an unhealthy fat kid, so you know what, I'm not ashamed of it. But you know, with her, she grows up eating protein bars and, you know, mostly just healthy foods, and I wouldn't really consider protein shakes to be necessarily healthy, but they are good for you if you were trying to be very athletic. But if you are not athletic and you were just drinking protein shakes or protein bars, those are very, very bad for you, just so we're clear. But regardless, the orphanage that she's unfortunately at doesn't really provide any of this stuff for her, so she is is kind of forced to live a different lifestyle, and she hates it, and you can tell that her parents feel extremely terrible for her being in this situation. The next scene, of course, we get Barbra and Pat kind of talking about Eclipso, and one of the big things that they're talking about with each other is whether or not they bring this up to Courtney. I love that Pat isn't really against like bringing her in on it. He's not like necessarily trying to convince Barbra not to, but he's also taking Barbra's side the entire time. He knows that, you know, it's like Stargirl is at the end of the day Barbra's daughter, and so therefore, you know, he feels like when it comes to kind of the darker stuff within the Justice Society, like it should be up to her whether or not he cues her in on this. And it does make me kind of wonder though, like what is it that Eclipso has done to the JSA and to the ISA that's so terrible that they even consider keeping it a secret from her? Because you look back at season 1 and everything that Courtney has already been through, what she's done for the world, how she and the rest of the Justice Society actually saved the world from being brainwashed. You know, it makes you kind of wonder what what it is that Eclipso has done to the JSA that is so terrible that they need to keep it a secret from Courtney. Were the JSA at some point brainwashed? Were they never actually killed? Were they just trapped inside this shadowy dimension, or what's going on there? There's also kind of another thing that pops up later on that actually kind of puts a damper in Courtney's trust with Pat, but not in a CW way that involves the forced drama, but more in the way that kind of shows that if she's going to get answers, she has to find it for herself. Basically, the next scene, she comes in and overhears them talking about Eclipso, and both of them are kind of surprised that she recognizes the name, so they ask each other kind of what they know about Eclipso. Courtney admits that she knows absolutely nothing about him, only the fact that his name was dropped by Beth when she was putting on the goggles, and she for a brief moment almost had Chuck back online. And Pat basically kind of tells her he's literally the devil in the shadows, and that he is very dangerous, and if the Black Diamond is missing, it might mean that the Shade is trying to use the Black Diamond to get Eclipso's powers, his powers to essentially manipulate other people's minds. The next scene, we got Sydney with the Black Diamond, and of course, it's kind of what I was going over a little bit earlier, is the idea that I feel like Sydney feels like she has more control than she actually does. Like, in a lot of ways, Eclipso is the puppet master, but Sydney refuses to accept that's the case because he's constantly messing with her head, and she's constantly saying, stop doing that, but of course he continues to do so, knowing that, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to put me in the box? No, you need me. So, you know, there's definitely kind of a power thing going on between the two of them, where I feel like Eclipso believes he's way more in control than Sydney is, but, you know, the one thing that makes me think that Sydney might have actually been in more control to begin with, more than she's letting on here, is just kind of knowing where her dad where she comes from, specifically with her dad, because to me the Dragon Master had been kind of doing that with Icicle this whole time too. The idea that the Dragon Master, he comes off as a guy who works for Icicle, but clearly he definitely had his own purpose behind the whole thing, and kind of gave Icicle the illusion that he was the one in charge of everything. But really, I feel like Dragon Master was the one kind of pulling the strings in season 1, even though he was doing it under the shadows. And that's kind of what I get the idea of with her. Like, she's kind of coming off as vulnerable to Eclipso in order to have Eclipso believe that he has full power, but it is very possible that she might actually be manipulating him the whole time. So it's like a double manipulation type of a thing. Eclipso thinks he's got the upper hand, but it's like only pretending to give Sydney full power, and Sydney's fully aware of this, and so she's ready to have another double cross. But who knows? You know, with villains, there's always a double cross within a double cross, so you always got to keep your eye out for that type of thing. But he ends up making her see her actual biological mother, and here it's implied that Sydney in an indirect way was responsible for her mother getting killed. And the way I think it's going to play out, this is just my prediction, is that as a little girl, she had always, much like most kids that never actually got to know their biological parents, she probably did some research trying to find out who her biological father was, and it's what ended up leading to him being able to track her down and therefore kill her mother and then steal her for himself in order to raise as a warrior instead of as, you know, a kid. So the next scene, we see that Mike is doing his usual paper route when he actually reads the cover of the newspaper magazine, finding out that Sportsmaster and his wife have both broken out of prison. And here we get a fun visual gag with the camera, something that you don't see too often on the other shows, because again, it kind of comes down to the way the other shows are filmed compared to this one. Whereas Stargirl is given several weeks to film each individual episodes, the other CW shows end up having like 1 week to film every episode, so some of the clever camera tricks that they could have gotten out of them kind of go away because you don't have time to plan them, whereas here they do, so you get fun visual gags such as a POV shot of the newspaper in front of the camera followed by the newspaper coming down and then us seeing Sportsmaster right there. Again, kind of gags that work really well if you're not filming an entire episode within a week, but when you have it like spread out throughout the year, things that you can pull off, and something that I feel like would really benefit other CW shows like The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. You give them less episodes a year, you give them more time to film those episodes, you don't even need to raise the budget, and these shows could have like potentially ended up looking like Stargirl in a lot of ways. We then also, so after we got the fact that they're both escaped, of course, they're both using Mike, kind of threatening, but in like the very crazy kind of, I don't know how you would describe it. They're very optimistic about the way that they're kidnapping him, and they're trying to be buddy-buddy by telling him, hey, everything's going to be fine as long as you don't try to run away from us. I absolutely love one of the lines that Mike says, which is, oh, I'd love to stay and talk, but you know, I gotta do some deliveries, I'm living off of tips, and then that's when you got Tigress grabbing him and going, here's the tip, don't try to run, because you can't. So some of the dialogue, the witty dialogue was just brilliant in this episode. We then have Courtney trying to reach out to Artemis because, you know, she does definitely feel bad about the situation that she's in. You know, I mean, she is kind of responsible for Artemis being in a foster home to begin with. So she tries to give Artemis an apple as a peace offering because Artemis wasn't able to get a hold of anything like healthy at the school cafeteria, and definitely, as I established earlier, definitely not from her foster home. But the moment she hands her the apple, she says she's sorry for the situation that she's in, and of course Artemis, kind of being stubborn, doesn't like to show weakness, so she just basically tells Courtney that she doesn't need her pity because her parents are innocent, which causes Yolanda to chuckle, which was definitely not the smartest move on her part, and that's what causes her to go really insane and just crushes the apple, which they imply is fresh. So I can tell you, crushing a fresh apple is not easy at all. And then she crushes it, followed by basically I don't know what it's called, if there's like a name for it, when you're walking past someone and you purposely like hit them with your own shoulder. Basically that's what she does to Courtney, and I love like kind of her reaction and just being like, wow, she is insane like her parents. We then get Sydney back at school for the first time, and she comes up to Isaac claiming that she wants to make new friends and start all over, but this is her beginning her recruitment of the new ISA. And you can tell that she's being very smart about it, going about it the same way you would if you were recruiting for a cult. She's going after the lonely ones first, specifically Isaac, and trying to tell him that he can be a part of something much bigger. Very next scene, we cut back to the car shop, and we see that Sportsmaster and Tigress don't necessarily have any malicious intentions. Instead, what they want is to just lay low until the tryouts start, and then they want to be able to see the tryouts, see her daughter try out for the football team, and then as soon as they get to see that, they will break themselves back into prison. And Pat isn't quite sure if they're being genuine about this, if they're actually not there to cause trouble, but it's also one of those situations of, I either trust you or you guys kill me, because let's face it, as much as I would say that Pat definitely is pretty tough for you know, a guy his age, he definitely is not tough enough to take down these two. I mean, we saw him in season 1 fighting just Sportsmaster by himself, and even that he was not strong enough to do. The only like advantage he would have had is his robot, which they even say they'll give him like a head start to get inside of it. But of course, like, I assume this robot does take a minute to warm up, and not to mention the fact that they could totally outrun Pat, so even if they gave him that head start, he still wouldn't have a chance against them. So he does the smart thing and just, you know, lets the evening play out, essentially. The next scene we get, I absolutely love, because you have Barbra, of course, not being happy about this, but also kind of getting they really don't have a choice in this matter. But Pat does try to comfort her by saying, hey, if they wanted to kill us, we'd be dead already. But I love how that doesn't work. She's like, that doesn't make me feel better. But what another thing, again, going back to the camera work in this episode and going back to how, you know, with this show having a lot more time to film each of their individual episodes, they're able to do some cool camera work like this. I love how the beginning shots of this are at a very wide angle, because you get Pat and Sportsmaster, who are incredibly awkward at first, because, you know, you get the fact that Pat just is super uncomfortable with them being in his own house, followed by the fact that, you know, Sportsmaster try to kill him, you know, the previous year. So it's very awkward at first, and you get like this really wide shot to show like how the two of them are just very distant mentally from each other. But as they start talking, it's kind of interesting to see the two of them bond. And as they start bonding, the camera gets closer to kind of indicate that the two of them are becoming closer. They even look back at the previous season and realize, hey, you know, the two of us were kind of becoming friends. I mean, it was really more of a one-sided friendship where Sportsmaster was kind of forcing himself to be Pat's friend in a lot of ways, but at the same time, there was still like somewhat of a connection between the two of them there, like that could have actually led to a real friendship. And you get a funny line where Sportsmaster is just like, I wonder whatever happened to that. And Pat just kind of politely replies, well, I mean, you did try to kill me, so I think that might have put a little bit of a damper on a relationship. I absolutely love the way Luke Wilson delivers his lines in this episode in particular. Absolutely incredible. And yeah, you do kind of see that even though these two have like nothing in common, you can kind of get the chemistry between the two of them. The same surprisingly goes for Barbra and Tigress, which I did not expect. Something I absolutely love about the season is how much more they're including Barbra within the show, so she's a lot more cued in on the JSA stuff, and it leads to her having some really great interactions here with Tigress, because the two of them, again, you know, very same thing as Pat and Sportsmaster. They're not like really comfortable being with each other, and as they start to talk, though, you know, it starts out very weird because Barbara's like offering her coffee and tap water, and she's just kind of like, you drink that stuff? And which I will say this though, she's very nitpicky about the foods that Barbra is offering her, or same with the drinks, but she also came from prison, which I don't imagine having better options than what she's offering her, unless she's at some super fancy prison that I've never heard about before, or maybe prisons in this universe aren't as corrupt and terrible as they are in the real world, who knows. But regardless, I do like how at first, like, you know, it's just one of those things where they're both just like quietly waiting for time to pass so they don't have to talk to each other, but then they accidentally bond on something, and that's, you know, kids. When it comes to them both expressing how much they really love their kids, especially with comparing Courtney to Artemis, they both kind of have the thing in common where they're both like, you know, both mothers are very proud of their daughters because of how driven they are, but it can be a pain in the ass as mothers, because it also means that they are very stubborn and very rarely listen to the two of them, and that's what kind of causes the two of them to like really bond with each other, which I actually thought was kind of a cute, sweet moment. We then cut to a diner where we see Yolanda is now working there, and this might have been established earlier, but I'm going to be totally honest, I actually don't remember. And what's even going to be funnier is if I look back at one of my reviews and see that I actually talked about this exact thing before. But regardless, what's really cool is they're able to kind of multitask here. So Yolanda's able to do her job, but because you know, all of them are hanging out there, also talking about what's going on with the Eclipso, she's also able to you know, be cued in on everything that's going on with their research. I do like how old school but not outdated this whole scene feels, because they do mention that Eclipso, there's nothing about him on the internet. Like, they tried Googling him, they couldn't find anything. So the only way they can really do research is to go to the books, like basically go to their town's library or go to their town's used bookstore. Like, they got to do research on Eclipso the old fashioned way. And I absolutely love this because it gives kind of an excuse for them to like have to do some real investigation, but also they give a good good reason for why it is they don't do something simple such as Google it and find out. So it was a really cool moment between here, or within the scene. And then they also discover something very interesting about the island that I might have a small nitpick about, but not like a big one, which is the fact that the island is off every single map known to man, except for the maps that predate 1830. I believe the year was 1830, if I'm not mistaken, but every year after 1830, the island has disappeared from every map out there. Basically, they believe that the island was purposefully hidden in order to prevent anyone from going looking for it, but excuse me, but unfortunately, but this is where my nitpick kind of comes in. We have satellite mapping now, so how is anything really uncharted nowadays? That's kind of my nitpick for the episode, really, is the idea of something being uncharted and not appearing on maps. I mean, maybe that's a thing, but I would be very surprised if that was the case, just because, again, we have satellite imaging, so I feel like, you know, every island that exists, there should be evidence of it at this point. But, you know, nitpicking aside, again, I did love how very, like, old school but not dated this whole scene felt. We then have the ISA headquarters where Sydney kind of reveals to Isaac that his father used to be the original fiddler, and basically she tries to teach him how to use the violin, or you know what the weapon that his father used, but of course he reveals that he actually doesn't know how to play it. But of course I'm pretty sure we're going to see that kind of becoming a thing that he learns later on, because even though he's more of a tuba person, I do feel like a lot of instruments are very universal. Like once you learn how to play one instrument, it becomes so much easier to learn how to play a bunch of other instruments. At least that's how it was for me with piano. When I learned how to play piano, even though it was only very basic piano, it made learning how to play guitar just that much easier for me. I don't think I ever would have been able to figure out how to play guitar if I didn't start with the piano first. Even though they're two very different instruments, it's very much like once you kind of get the hang of one, a lot of the knowledge from that instrument really transfers over to the next, so it makes it that much easier to learn. So I feel like it's going to be the same thing with him with the violin, so it is going to be kind of cool to see him later on become the new fiddler for the season. We then cut to Courtney, who is in the used bookstore where she runs into the Shade, and here is where she basically reveals that she thinks she knows what the Shade's up to, which is that he's trying to team up with the Eclipso. And I like how he just kind of makes fun of her. He doesn't really try hard to deny it. He just kind of says, "You're really silly for believing that that's what my plan is." And then that's when he basically reveals that no, my plan is to find the Black Diamond and throw it into the deepest part of the ocean where no one will ever be able to find it again. And it's interesting because I feel like if this was season 1 Courtney, she would have completely doubted him and said that he's full of absolute crap. But because again, she, you know, showing that she actually does learn from her mistakes and she actually grows as a character, she totally believes it, or not totally believes him. I shouldn't say that. She doesn't blindly just believe that he's not looking for it, but she does kind of like, you know, realize a few things like, hey, I guess if that's true, you know, it makes sense, because if he really wanted to kill the Justice Society, he literally could have if he wanted to. So he's clearly not there to just, you know, be evil for the sake of being evil. And I even like how he kind of uses that line. You know, there's a difference between being bad and evil, and kind of saying that Eclipso is pure evil, and he doesn't claim to be a good person, but he's definitely not evil like Eclipso does. Another thing that gets revealed here that also kind of goes back to the very first episode of the season is the idea that Eclipso actually killed Dr. Midnight's daughter. And something I forgot to bring up in the diner scene is that we find out that the person who was in charge, or who had recently explored the island and brought back the Black Diamond, was a person named Bruce Gordon, which was also the kid that we saw during that opening for the first episode. So it's really interesting because this is a lot like season 1 in the sense that like a lot of small details that you don't think really matter actually end up playing a really big part later on in the episode, because we find out that little girl was Dr. Midnight's daughter, and we find out that the boy who basically killed her was the one who discovered the Black Diamond. A lot of really well written moments about this show and I love how these subtle details end up playing a much bigger part later on. But later we cut to Pat and Sportsmaster, and I love how at first it's very much Pat just trying to, he goes into the football stadium with this mentality of the sooner these tryouts are done, the better, because then the sooner these two will just turn themselves into prison. But I love how he ends up having fun watching the game with the two of them, especially like seeing how talented of a football player Artemis is. It was a really fun bonding moment between the two of them, but unfortunately it's cut short by none other than Cindy, who uses the Black Diamond to manipulate Artemis into believing that there is a SWAT officer there to kill both of her parents on site. And in actuality, it ends up being Courtney who finds out about Sportsmaster and Tigress, and so she, heads to the football stadium to see what's going on and to talk to Pat so the two of them can relay messages relay information to each other. But as Artemis sees Courtney as a SWAT officer, she immediately goes up to her and attacks her, but she is luckily stopped by the rest of the other football players. But it's that moment of, oh crap, what have I done, kind of a thing. The next moment we get both of Artemis's parents believing that, the reason she had that moment of bad judgment, I guess you could call it, or I guess you could say that mental breakdown, because I'm thinking of like how to put it in terms of like what they would have used, because of course they don't know that Sydney was the one who caused this mental breakdown, so they think that they might have been the cause of it just from being in the stadium. So they worry that they're the ones sabotaging their own daughter's future, which is why they kind of confess to her that they're both guilty and that they are both gonna go back to prison afterwards. But you get a really sweet moment between the three of them, just hugging it out and just both of them saying that they're incredibly proud of them. And I love how Courtney, who hasn't even spent any time with them, ends up feeling sorry for them in the end. And it's easy to see why. It's more like, it's less that you feel sorry for Tigress and Sportsmaster, because yeah, the two of them need to be in prison because these two are psychopathic murderers, but you feel really bad more than anything for Artemis, because she's the one really being hurt from losing her parents and from finding out the truth about them, that they are these crazy psychopaths. But it is really cool that despite them being incredibly insane, that they do clearly care for each other like a family. So I thought this whole moment between the three of them was incredibly well written. We then have Pat and Courtney, keeping secrets from each other, kind of going back to season 1, but again, not in the forced drama type of way that you get in a lot of these other CW shows, but more in a Pat's afraid to tell Courtney what he knows because he knows that Barbra wouldn't be happy about it. And Courtney doesn't want to tell Pat what she's learned because, well, she realizes that it's just going to lead to Pat kind of keeping more secrets from her, because as they establish in the show, Courtney isn't stupid. She knows when she's being either lied to or not being told the entire truth. So at the very end, it just kind of leads to them doing their own investigation of Eclipso on their own, which I thought was a really brilliant way to take the story, because it helps both characters kind of grow on their own, but it also prevents themselves from doing that for CW drama that you usually get in these type of shows. We then have Sydney trying to recruit Artemis, and basically because Artemis didn't make the tryouts due to her tantrum, Sydney is able to use that as a way to finally get Artemis to join the ISA. So again, kind of going back to the whole thing of her recruiting the same way like cult leaders tend to do. Yeah, they go for the lonely ones first, and the ones who aren't necessarily lonely, they still have people in their lives, they try to cut them off from the people in their lives. So she did that with Artemis and the football team by trying to prevent her from making the tryouts. Not to mention, with her parents already being in prison, she is now super isolated, making it incredibly easy for her to recruit Artemis. And what's going to be really tragic later on is that I feel like this is going to be how she's able to recruit Mike into joining the ISA, is just with using the Black Diamond in order to manipulate Mike maybe into seeing something that didn't actually happen, or into just controlling his mind altogether. I'm not 100% sure how it's all going to play out, but one thing that's for sure is that it's going to be incredibly hard to watch when you see Mike, who does genuinely seem like a really good kid, suddenly be manipulated by Sydney and the Black Diamond. So that's definitely going to be something incredibly tragic later on. We then get a scene with Beth finally getting through to Chuck, seemingly at first. She keeps referring to the person in the goggles as Chuck because, that was the name of the AI, Charles's AI in the previous season. But the entire time she's talking with him, he eventually kind of asks, wait, why are you calling me Chuck? And that's what she says, you're Charles's AI, right? And then he asks, wait, AI? And then that's when we get one last reveal. We find out that the original Dr. Midnight is still alive, and he is within the shadow dimension that Eclipso seemingly trapped him in, making you kind of wonder, is the rest of the Justice Society here? Are they still alive? And is this maybe how Starman actually comes back, because he was originally trapped in the shadow dimension thing, which isn't likely because we also saw that Starman did die, we physically see him. So I do have a slight worry with the Eclipso storyline, because we saw how the JSA all died in the original first episode, and it kind of worries me that they might be doing a little bit of a retcon, and I don't think retcons are always a bad thing as long as they're done right. You can easily still immerse yourself in the story and just assume, okay, yeah, I could see this having happened originally, but just that's not what we as the audience saw. But with what we saw in the first episode, if they do kind of have a big retcon where it turns out Eclipso was behind the whole thing during that final battle with the ISA and the JSA, it's going to be a bit challenging for me to believe that, just because it would be really weird that that's what happened and that it never got even mentioned before. But I don't know, again, that might not be where the story goes anyways, and given how well written these last 4 episodes are, I feel like even if there is a bit of a retcon in that sense, I don't think it'll be a poorly written retcon, and it may not even be a retcon to begin with. It could be something that they originally had intended for the story to go since season 1. They just never brought it up because they wanted to wait and know for sure that they were getting a second season before name dropping Eclipso and that kind of a thing. But again, it kind of gets me worried, but not super worried. Now, the thing I loved about this episode the most, I think, was the comedy. The comedy in this episode worked so well, and what was so amazing about it is that the comedy was driven by the story rather than the story being driven by the comedy, which is, I feel like, the issue that, or at least one of the issues that you get in Legends of Tomorrow and The Flash. Now, even if you guys love those two shows, which is fine, because like I said, I really like The Flash. It's just that this last season I just was not a fan of at all, and even before this last season you still had seasons like 4 and 5 which just weren't really good, and then not to mention the ending of season 3, which almost made me hate the entirety of season 3 as a whole. So you definitely can, there's definitely a lot of downhill that the Flash has been going for, and I think it all kind of comes down to the fact that ever since I want to say most of season 3, but it really didn't start till season 4, it felt like they cared more about the comedy than the actual story, and at least in a lot of episodes, not in every episode, but in a lot of them. And in this last season of The Flash, you can tell that they focused way more on the comedy than they did the actual story. And same thing with Legends of Tomorrow. The entire show has now just turned into a comedy that drives the story forward, and it makes it so when you have those emotional moments in Legends of Tomorrow or The Flash, they're so few and far in between that you just kind of end up not really caring in the end. So what I love about Stargirl is that the comedy just kind of comes naturally with the story, with the situations that they're in, and I really wish that this is the type of writing that we would see more on The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. And I think it all comes down to this, those shows mainly focus on comedy. Again, even if you like these two shows, you can't deny that The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow are focused more on the comedy than anything else, whereas you have Stargirl, which isn't focused on the comedy, it's just focused on its own story more than anything, and yet the comedy just comes so naturally that this episode of Stargirl had me laughing way more than I ever did watching Legends of Tomorrow and The Flash, and it wasn't even trying to get me to laugh that much, which really just shows how talented the writing staff for Stargirl is, or it kind of shows that the writing staff for The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow just isn't that talented anymore, or they're just burnt out or something, because I don't want to say they're not talented, because that's really mean, and especially because there have been great episodes of both series, so clearly the writers know what they're doing at times, but it might be a mixture of just being burnt out, and maybe they've just utilized everything they can, so they just don't really they don't have enough confidence in their own writing to not rely too much on comedy. But this is how you would do it. I feel like just let the situation play out and you have comedy that comes naturally rather than forcing in joke after joke after joke. So it's really too bad, because this is, again, I look at Stargirl and then Superman and Lois especially, and I really wish these would be the new directions that the other CW shows would want to go in, especially because I feel like, again, it comes to less is more. Give them less episodes. So this isn't me talking about the writing team anymore. This is me just talking about the production of the other CW shows and why I wish they would give them less episodes, but they would utilize those episodes a lot better when it comes to some of the special effects and when it comes to just the overall camera movements that you could totally do when given a lot more time to plan out an episode individually. But yeah, I get that we might not ever see that when it comes to The Flash or Legends, but at the same time, it's something that I really wish we would get at some point. But yeah, guys, this was another really fantastic episode. Again, probably my favorite episode of the season because of just how much I laughed and just how much I just really loved some of the character chemistry within it. And then the way it also is able to have a little bit of a distrust between Courtney and Pat without it turning into that forced CW drama. I think the way Stargirl balances everything is so perfect, and it's everything that I really wish the other shows would kind of go back to. It reminds me of why I used to love The Flash when The Flash first aired, along with all these other shows. Same with even Legends of Tomorrow during its second season was absolutely fantastic, and I kind of miss this type of writing from the other shows. But guys, of course, at the end of the day, as I always say, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts on this episode of Stargirl in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, but guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+. I'll talk to you all next week.
If you enjoy our content and want to be a part of helping our channel grow, become a patron supporter. We have affordable tiers to choose from that offer a variety of exclusive and early access content, from audio files for all of our shows for you to enjoy on the road, access to our Discord community, and plenty of reactions, reviews, character breakdowns, and more. Check us out at patreon.com/A+opinions, and as always, remember, like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so anytime we drop a brand new video, you will be notified.